Welcome back to the Silent Plus podcast. My name is Josh Wofford, and across the desk from me is
John Nicholson in full yawning stretch here.
that looked like a good yawn.
It was good. Needed.
We're doing this. What time is it? 3:24 in the afternoon. This is prime nap time.
Yeah. Well, I'm just coming up out of my biorhythm dip in the afternoon. It's usually about 2:00. I have to get up. I'm useless at the desk trying to study 2:00. No, not going to happen.
My dip is from like 2 until about 11 o'clock at night.
Need a full REM sleep cycle to knock that out.
Yeah, that's what I need. Anyways, so what we wanted to do is just kind of a recap episode. I'd have to go back and check how many episodes
I don't
we've done on this. I know we did an intro episode and then episode after each sermon, and then we had like some on location
and then
episodes.
The Kids on Creation. My gosh,
yes,
I have listened to that 14 times. I know.
Absolutely, what a fantastic episode. So there's been probably more episodes on this than we've done. Well,
that's up there with
yeah. It's been
a good series.
It's been a broad-reaching series. So what we want to do is just do one, maybe shorter. We don't know how long this is going to take. Just kind of a recap episode of going over what you've learned, what I've learned, what the conversations we've had with other people.
Yeah, some of those
and just kind of tie a bow on this for now, but also leave the door open for other conversations that we'll have moving forward.
Yeah, it's just been really. It's encouraging, but pastorally, it's also sometimes funny is the wrong term. It's because it's not ha-ha funny, but it's just odd funny. Speaking of funny, there's my cell phone going off. But just odd funny, the things that do stick, the things that folks take note of. And this particular series of sermons and the dedicated time that we had to invest in thinking through this has really gotten some people's minds maybe at least awakened a little bit to what God's doing around them in creation, but also their responsibility. And give you a couple of quick stories. One, Loretta was up here cutting grass and doing some things, and she sent me a text message with a picture of a plastic bag in the middle of the sidewalk. And, I said, they're everywhere. And she said, but those little things, they make a difference. Those little things stick. And she was talking about how she started noticing more and more of them. So it's just kind of, like I say, an awakening there that, we can do better. Mm-hmm. And maybe there are other ways that we can begin to address this. We're not going to fix the plastic bag problem, you and me, but by me being more conscious, I do make a difference with that.
You can do your part.
Absolutely, I can do my part. But then there are the others that, Janice Williams posted out the other day of, she was gathering flowers for our Easter cross, and there was a little frog, and, she took notice that the frog was singing the praises of the Lord, and inviting her into that. And so just those kinds of ahas, and I think some other people have woken up to that. So that's been encouraging and affirming. And then beyond that, just some conversations I've had, in passing or over lunch with some folks, as they're beginning to think through implications of what does it mean for them to steward the place that they're in, the implications of what does it mean for them to do the work that they do well, because it does have eternal consequence. So maybe helping to reframe a little bit of, and to break down that sacred secular divide, that because a lot of times we have compartmentalized our religious life to Sunday, and we Monday to Saturday is something else, but acknowledging and recognizing, hey, this is everywhere we go is an opportunity for us to join God and participate in what He's inviting us into out here in the world, and creation is certainly part of that.
Yeah, and I also want to bring up Psalm 8 again.
Oh man, yeah.
I think as much as I love your preaching, John, there's just something about the
easy. Watch out.
just the Word of God itself, right?
Yeah.
I had known Psalm 8, ever since I've been reading the Bible, but there was just something coupled with the sermons that Psalm 8, because I don't even think you really unpacked Psalm 8
I never
in
did
any
intentionally.
substantial way.
No.
But just everything that you would say during the sermon, I'm bringing it back to Psalm 8 in my mind and just making these connections, and just to know that we are crowned with honor and glory to have dominion, and thinking about how I have failed in that sense in times past, but trying to flesh out and understand, here's what this needs to look like for me moving forward.
Yeah, and and to that also, the whole from the mouths of babes and infants, to crush the enemy, and man, again, just the commercial for the kids in creation. If I've listened to Lala sing "Jesus Loves Me" once, again, I've listened to it 14 times. I mean, it's such a beautiful thing. But then also the other conversations that are there, and how kids are, as they look at this creation and what they see, the things that they notice, and the fact that some of our children here in the church do notice, because they're kids that don't have any clue that they're actually real birds outside their windows, that they can see, or or the other creatures. And so it's just such a blessing to me, because with those kids, again, as Psalm 8 talks about, we are helping them to have a framework to see this world as a God-infused, God-blessed, God-praising, God-glorifying place. Broken, yes, but they have a chance to be a part of making it more whole, with the hope of resurrection, where it will be finally made whole, made new. And that's the beginning with the end in mind, where we started a while back. But the Psalm 8 thing, and just as another word of commendation for you, your meditations that you shared on the blog really helped, I know, me and several other folks really connect in with Psalm 8 and its message and how it fits in with this whole conversation about creation care.
Yeah, and I've been working on some stuff for Psalm 16. We're doing Psalm 16 right now, but anyways, that's to come later. Well, John, talk a little bit about the on location, because I know you went out to see David Sanders and Andy and Shannon and Art
Spent
Nichols.
a little time with Art,
and so tell us some of your thoughts on that. Like, what was some things that came out? What were some things that came out of those particular moments that you got to have that you probably couldn't have just sitting here in the in the studio, if you will.
That's right. That's right. In the controlled environment here. No, I think of David's, when I was out there with him on that day, it was such a windy day. And if you listen to that interview, you'll hear the wind on numerous occasions. But what a fitting thing for us as we're talking about walking in the Spirit, and that it's not, connecting spirit to the dirt, because that's really what we're doing. And here's this wind blowing through, a spring wind blowing through this farm that he's got, and just knowing the heart of this man. I mean, he loves God. He loves God and His Word, but he has also a very deep love for the earth and for that particular piece of earth that he gets to manage. And then I think of Art Nichols and just the saga that's there. And I don't know that we were really able to tap that in that interview, but he had dreams of this when he was going through his alcohol recovery at Canaan Land, of what this farm could be, and he's just now 10 years in beginning to see that. And it hasn't been one big whoosh, there it is. It's been small incremental steps, picking up sticks, as Art talks about. And he intentionally he wants people to be able to drive by that place that he's got and see what faithful stewardship looks like, not for him, but so that they will say, man, what God is doing in this place.
Yeah.
And then the conversation with Andy and Shannon, what a tremendous story, where they took literally a rundown junk heap of a house and a rundown, overgrown piece of property that was really worthless as it stood, but as they have termed it, they call it Restoration Acres, and as I sat in their restored kitchen that she didn't have at all. I mean, she was cooking on a camp stove when they first came here, but now it's a beautiful, comfortable, wonderful place to gather. And then you look out the window and you see her herb garden, and beyond that, the actual garden where they're growing vegetables, and just beyond that are the chickens and the sheep and the goats and their milk cow that they've got there. And I get to benefit from that because I bought milk from them, and I bought the pig from them, and those kinds of things. But that's part of this, is they want to restore the land for the sake of helping it to be productive and being what it can be, but also to be part of community, to share with their pastor, as well as other people in the community. They talk about their neighbor and their relationship so it's not restoring. And I think this is the beautiful piece of this, and this is really where all of this winds up, is in restoring that little piece of land. It has also begun the process of restoring relationships that are broken, because several of their neighbors are African American, and many of them felt like the white folks aren't going to give me time of day. But Andy and Shannon have built bridges intentionally for that. And so whereas their little piece of land is now producing wonderful meat and vegetables and those kinds of things, and eggs and all the things that go along with it, it's also producing fruitful relationships that are not only healing, but are beginning to reach into some of the other difficulties within those families, because those families are realizing there's something going on there.
Yeah.
And I want some of whatever that looks like. And so there are just so many pieces of that. And I think, Josh, and one of the, again, just to go back and try to grab some of the purpose of this, was we have, to use the old quote, we've become so heavenly minded that we're no earthly good sometimes. But to realize that doing earthly good is, in fact, heavenly work. There is an end. There is a finality that will come. There's a moment. Right. It's all made new. But we're, to use Wendell Berry's term, we're practicing resurrection right now. We should be doing those things that we'll be doing for eternity right now. And these are some people who are beginning to do that. They're taking wastelands and turning them into fruitful places. They're taking responsibility for something and making it and utilizing it well for the glory of God. And we should all be doing that, whether we have 300 acres or if we've got 300 feet of frontage property, whatever it is, that's ours. We should take care of it and do it well.
So, speaking of the restored relationships and love of neighbor, it just seemed fitting that we unintentionally culminated this series with getting together with Providence on that last Sunday.
Maybe unintentional on our part.
Well, yes, that's what I meant. We did not look,
we're not smart enough to plan it like
2 or 3 months in advance and say, all right, here's where we'll be in our sermon series, and so we need to schedule this get together on this night. No, that was
God knows what He's up to. Right.
And so the day that you preached about loving thy neighbor was a day where we got together with Providence that night and got to worship together and eat together. And I think I made the comment on the podcast right after that there's not very often you get to live out the sermon that you hear just that morning later on that day. I think it probably should happen more often.
Right.
But it just happened that way. And so I guess talk a little bit about that, maybe some of the behind the scenes. Why did we even do that in the first place? And how does that speak to us loving our neighbor in the context of this whole idea of creation care?
Well, I think part of that is because this is where we live in Marion, Alabama. This is our community. This is our piece of creation that we get to be ambassadors for the kingdom, where we get to proclaim that there is a king who's come and he's coming again, and we should be getting ready. And it's no secret here in Marion, Alabama. The racial divisions have been real. This is where the civil rights movement really was sparked with the killing of Jimmy Lee Jackson, and that led to the bridge crossing in Selma that's celebrated every year. But so much of that story is wrapped right here, the Jim Crow laws. And again, these are things that are living history for people. This isn't stuff we can read about in history books, but we can also go talk to Della Maynor, or we can talk to Lorenzo Curry, or folks who actually lived what this stuff was all about. Mm-hmm. And they're right here. Those are our neighbors, and they know what that brokenness looked like. But now we are inviting, and they are inviting us as well to restore that, to bring what is broken back to some semblance of wholeness. That's connected to taking care of a piece of land, because if we don't take care of the piece of land, as Scripture says, it'll vomit you out. It will do that if our sin is that. And I think maybe, I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole, because I'm not in an authoritative enough place to say this for sure. However, the evidence would bear out that perhaps the land here has done just that, because the census data is very clear. 2/3 of the population of Perry County no longer lives here. Mm-hmm. In a sense, the land has vomited us out. But what do you do when that remnant is there? You begin to build up the wall again. You begin to restore the olive grove and the vineyard. Yeah. This is the biblical language that's there. So what is our olive grove? What's our vineyard? Well, that's our neighbors down the hill, and how do we help them to know that they are loved and welcomed and respected? And simply by inviting them in our doors, it makes that happen. Yeah. So again, the connection between place and land and a particular... God's Spirit, God's work is always local. This is why those weird names are in the Bible. Galilee, although that's not all that weird, but it doesn't have a literal connotation to me like Heiberger does. I mean, I say Heiberger and I think of the store, and I think that's where the Green family lives. Mm-hmm. And, the other things are in Heiberger. It has meaning for me like Galilee doesn't necessarily. But God's always working in a local place, and this is our local place. And
God's at work in Heiberger as well.
Yes, right. Yeah, all of our listeners in Heiberger don't send us letters. But so what happened with and what has been, because this has been something that's been in process pretty long years ago with Roy Barnett and others that planted some seeds that we're just now beginning to see the fruit out of those 40, 50 years later. So it was a moment to put into practice that very thing. And it was a beautiful thing to leave that worship service, which in itself was a wonderful time, beautiful time. But then to give the instruction of us to not sit in our cliques, if you will, the people that we're most familiar with, but to leave space so that we could intentionally sit with someone that we didn't really know all that well. And as I came into the fellowship hall and saw that happening, and then began kind of half listening to some of the conversations that were going on, it was just worship service part 2.
Yep.
There was worship that was continuing around those tables, and then it spilled out into our community, because people were talking, not just people from Siloam and Providence, but people who don't attend either of those places were talking about what happened here, because it's significant.
Yep.
There was restoration. There was binding up of old wounds. There were new bridges that were being built. And that's because we began to care and love for our neighbor.
Yep.
We got to find some more ways to do stuff like that.
And I think we will.
We are. We're
intentionally moving in that direction. So
right.
Just be on the lookout for more and more stuff
Absolutely.
Like that happening. So, well, yeah, John. All right. So here's my last question for you.
All right.
If you got more stuff you want to talk about, you
no,
can.
That's good.
But as far as from me, here's my last one. What is the number one takeaway that you're taking away from this, where maybe if the Lord tarries for another 20 years, this is what's sticking in your mind?
I really think for me it's going to be that Wendell Berry ideal of practicing resurrection. What does that mean? How do we put that into? I mean, because that begins to touch everything. Me pulling weeds in the garden, or me picking up trash down the road, or me taking a basket of tomatoes to my neighbor. All of those things. practicing hospitality. All of that is part of caring for creation. If I don't care well for creation, and sitting down at a table with some friends and some new friends, some strangers to me, all that comes out of caring for this place and making it a place where people, one, feel that they can be here, and two, that they want to be here. It needs to be a beautiful place. Beauty matters in our world.
Yeah.
It needs to be a place that is filled with hospitality and genuine care that's known. And all those things are we'll do those naturally in the resurrection to come.
Yeah.
But we get a chance to put them into practice now. I'll never forget Nathan Kreitz when he came, gosh, a long time ago now. He was planting a church, but he talked about being a good neighbor in New York City. And his statement was, and it just has stuck with me, he said, being a good neighbor in a world where people are not good neighbors is a vivid and visible witness. Man, I just think about that.
Yeah.
That's all he was doing. He was just practicing resurrection there. This is the kinds of things we should do for one another anyway. And I just hope that people wake up some to the glory of God that just surrounds us each and every day. I was out helping one of our church members over the weekend, and it wasn't a real busy, it required attention, but it didn't require me to be, hands in the dirt all the time with this kind of thing. But so I had a lot of standing around time and heard some birds singing, so I pulled out the Merlin Bird app. We'll give a commercial for that. But heard a Kentucky warbler, and I thought, well, am I sure about that? And the Bird app has a button where you can play the song back. And I played the song, and my goodness, that little bird didn't come and perch about 10 feet away from me in response to the song.
That's amazing.
It was amazing, and it was beautiful. And did I take it as a God thing? Yeah, I did, absolutely. God just smiling at me and letting me see part of his, because it's a migratory bird. I won't see it again the rest of this year. But just those kinds of things, waking up that this kind of wonder exists around us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And as Elizabeth Barrett Browning said, most of us are just picking blackberries. We just miss it.
Yep.
So
let's open our eyes.
No doubt.
Absolutely. All right, John. Any last thoughts?
No, it's been good. And thank you so much again for your investment in helping us to engage a little more intentionally and thoughtfully with Psalm 8. That's been a big part of that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, if you missed any of the podcast,
go back and find it.
Here's a commercial for what Casey's been working on. She's been moving all the podcasts from podcast.com to the church app. So they'll be on Subsplash on the church app. So take a look at that. Take advantage of that.
Right.
And if you have any questions about how to find those, just call the church office or tag one of us on Sunday morning when our minds are elsewhere, and we'll definitely be able to help you.
We'll get you plugged right in there.
But anyways, John, again, thank you for leading us through this. Thank you for following the Holy Spirit's leading in your heart to lead us through this. And I know this will be an ongoing conversation that will just kind of trickle in and out.
Yeah, we'll probably bump into it again along the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's going to be more creation that needs some care.
I think so. All right. Well, until next time.
Practice resurrection. See ya.